Meanwhile, coming up is the men's 1,500 meters. Saeed Awita holds the world mark, established 2 years ago, 329.46. The South African expatriate Sidney Marie, who has opted to run in the 5,000 here and not in this event, holds the American record at 329.77. And we'll take a look at the field and some newcomers. Pigg and Spivey, Frickert, Wicksell, Myers, Marsala, Hacker, and Atkinson comprising part of the field along with Chuck Aragon, Tim Simpson, and the big name, of course, Steve Scott, along with McKeon. But it's Spivey and it's Scott who will be the people to watch. There is Steve Scott, number 317 at the age of 31. Top-ranked American 9 of the last 10 years, and he'd be no surprise to win it, nor would Jim Spivey, who starts in lane 2.
Well, Steve Scott has made this the cornerstone of his career. This is the most important event of every year for him. Jim Spivey is the man who was #1 American that one year that Steve Scott wasn't. Spivey ran better in the Olympics and won the Olympic trials, and in their last race a month ago, it was 1/100th of a second separating them. Steve Scott the winner. So Spivey's been thinking about that and waiting for this moment.
1,500 meters, top 3 advancing to the World Championships in Rome, which begin in late August.
Mark Fricker
heads down the back straightaway.
Mark Fricker in the black, number 87 with the red hair, has a reputation of going out and setting a fast pace. It's very hard to beat Steve Scott and Jim Spivey because compared to the rest of the field, they have hundreds of races in Europe under their belt. They've seen every tactic. They're a little stronger, and it's going to take a monumental step up for some of the others in the pack, like a Dub Myers, who was the NCAA champion, Charles Marsala, who was the top American in the NCAA championship. Right now, it's developing into a tactical race, one of which Steve Scott will be sure to be able to position himself with 1 lap to go to take advantage of his speed.
It's interesting that Spivey and Scott are the 2 men to watch. Spivey has opted to set the pace here, and Steve Scott about where he normally is this early in the race.
Spivey would like to see a very slow race because he feels over the last 200 that he's faster than Steve Scott. So what Spivey is doing is non-leading. He is leading the race and slowing it down. The nerves and the indecision of the runners behind them allow this to happen. They defer to the great runners like Spivey or Scott. What one of the young runners has to do is say, well, I'm not going to win the race, but why come here and run a slow time? I'm going out and set a pace and get a faster time. Spivey's doing what he wants to do. Scott knows with about 600 yards to go, he's got to change the situation. Chuck Aragon, who was 4th in the Olympic trials and is perhaps the 3rd most experienced man, now taking up the lead with Dub Myers, 193, positioned well to make a kick, and Steve Scott staying on the outside. For every for every foot that Steve Scott is out from the rail, he's running 6 extra feet a lap. But at this point in a slow race like this, he's still going to do it, because the element of surprise is the important thing. Steve Scott now pushing a runner in front of him, and I believe Dub Myers went down to the infield. Steve Scott, the veteran, somebody jumped out in front of him, and he pushed him. That's okay. He was guarding his space.
So everybody but him involved in the tussle with 1.5 laps to go right now. 1.5 laps to go, and Jeff Atkinson tries to come up on the outside. Steve Scott biting. How does Scott look to you at this point?
Well, he's right in perfect position. You see him the 3rd, actually 4th, but he's right outside. If the man in 1st moves, he can go after him. If Jim Spivey or Tim Hacker behind him try and come up on his outside shoulder, he can react. Perfect position. Jim Spivey is in terrible position in the middle of the pack.
So now Scott
51.4 with 1 lap to go.
On the outside, still on the outside, with less than 1 lap to go. And beginning now to think about making his move. Atkinson out there as well.
Great race for Atkinson from Stanford, the collegian. He's really taking it now. Chuck Aragon, could be some bumping here, but Steve Scott perfectly controlling it. Passing, going into the turn, tried to tie Jim Spivey up, but Spivey didn't fall for it. He got out wide, and this is it. Spivey has a good shot at him now. This is what he wanted to happen.
That's Spivey on the outside. Spivey and Scott coming down the stretch, and it's Spivey with the lead. Scott trying to catch him, and he will not be able 2 as Spivey wins it. Scott finishes in second position, and Marsala winds up third. So those three earning a berth for the United States at the World Championships. Jim Spivey, who had set that slow early pace and then was content to be in the middle of the pack, was able to come up on the outside, overtake Steve Scott, and win the men's 1,500-meter final at the U.S. Outdoor Track and Field Championships in San Jose. We'll be back. There are the official results. Spivey wins it. Slow time, 3:43.66. Scott second, Marsala third. We can tell you as we...